Hi book friends, I'm Erin, and this is Erin Go Read. Before I get started with my June wrap-up part 1, I want to welcome all of you new subscribers and a huge thank you to Claudia from Spinster's Library from the shout out on your channel. Welcome to all you new viewers. Enjoy. Now let's roll that beautiful book footage. Today's part 1 of my June wrap-up. I have 5 books to talk to you about today. I'm going to start with the lowest rated books and go up to my highest rated book, which incidentally goes from most recently read to the first book I read in the month. So let's get started. The first book I just finished last night. I listened to it on audiobook, but I have a physical copy, and that is The Nest by Cynthia Dupree Sweeney. In The Nest, we follow a dysfunctional family, particularly the 4 adult siblings. They anticipate that they will receive a large sum of money, around $5 million each, upon the 40th birthday of the youngest of the siblings. So they have been essentially factoring this money in to their life plan in a way that they have saved money, spent money, allocated resources, what have you. And the oldest sibling, Leo, who is charismatic, charming, successful businessman, but also is known to be a bit of a reckless playboy. So in that vein, he ends up making a terrible mistake, hurting someone profoundly, physically, and in order to kind of to bail out of the situation, the mother uses a huge portion of the money to basically bail Leo out of the situation. And so now, rather than getting the $50 million or the $5 million they were anticipating, now their inheritance or their trust fund is looking at only about $50,000 each. So these adult siblings have real financial problems now based on this because they had been factoring this in. They'd been anticipating having this money to bail them out or to shore up their retirements, college funds, what have you. They've made decisions in the past that were far riskier than they would have, knowing that they had the nest to fall back on, and they even knew the date because it was based on the youngest's 40th birthday. So we follow these 4 siblings and then their immediate families who obviously this impacts. I really enjoyed the interplay between the siblings and then the way that each individual sibling dealt with now the circumstance of what it is and how they're going to proceed from here on out. One thing that was a bit of a miss for me though was there are so many, because we're following 4 essentially main characters, and then each of those characters have secondary and tertiary characters involved in their life, some of whom overweave, some of which overlap in each other's lives. We would all of a sudden, we'd have a scene where a character is brought up and it's a character we've seen before, and I have to think, rack my brain about who is this? Why are they relevant? Who are they attached to in the story? And so every time that happened, it really pulled me out of the story. But overall, it was an interesting, fun read. I was, happy to hop in my car and oh yeah, I'm listening to The Nest. So it was enjoyable. Definitely not perfect for me, but I had a good time. I wouldn't dissuade you from reading it. Particularly, I know some people really like family saga type stories, and I don't know, I haven't read enough of them to fully decide where I stand on that. This one's kind of for me, but there you have it. So I gave this 3 stars. As part of the Blessed Be the Readathon hosted by Commas and Ampersands, I read a book that had been adapted to TV, and that was Gillian Flynn's Sharper Objects. I had seen a lot about this, especially when the adaptation happened. A lot of people were reading this and watching the adaptation. I didn't know anything about the storyline itself, so I went into this really blind, other than knowing that it's a Gillian Flynn and it was dark and there are sharp objects involved. So we follow Camille, who is a reporter or a journalist in Chicago. and she gets an assignment to go back down to her hometown, a small town in Missouri, to investigate and kind of get the exclusive on the story of now 2 young girls, preteen girls, who have been killed. Now, Camille has some significant mental health issues herself. She has been a cutter for a very long time, and she's on the heels of a recent psychiatric hospitalization herself. So now, as she goes to this hometown, back to her hometown, and she's following this very dark, terrible story that's happening. A lot of her own personal issues, as well as just social dynamic issues of being back in her hometown, kind of add an additional challenge to just following this story of what's happening in a potential serial killer that is on the loose. This story is dark and disturbing. I enjoyed the setup. I enjoyed the resolution. There's some sexual promiscuity in particular that is just not to my personal taste, but it was appropriate for the characterization of what was going on in the lives of those characters. If you like something dark and kind of psychologically dark, it's not like thriller, slasher, anything like that. Humans can be awful, basically, is what it is. And when humans are awful, we have to cope in some sort of way, and that often also is awful. And this really explores that. I'm not sure if I want to look at the book adaptation. I probably will. I believe it's a series, so I can watch the first episode and decide if I want to continue on with it. I gave Sharp Objects 3 stars. Next up, we have Asymmetry by Lisa Halliday. This book was recommended by Russell at Ink and Paper blog. He really enjoyed it. I really couldn't remember anything about what the story was when I went into it, and I don't know, it was probably a good thing. After I read it, I ended up just kind of looking around BookTube and seeing what other people had to say on it, and I ended up finding it was like a live book event where Lisa Halliday speaks about it, and she's doing like a Q&A session, and that was really, really interesting, and a lot of kind of the layers of the onion were revealed for me, and it just really enhanced the overall reading experience. So this book, it's not even very long, 300 pages or so, just not even, like 270 pages. We have essentially 2 novellas and then like a coda. So the first novella, the first part of the book, is we follow Alice, who is an editor, and she's young. I think she's 27, and she gets into a relationship with Ezra Blazer, who is a very successful, famous writer. He's supposed to be modeled after Philip Roth, and like Philip Roth, he is expected to one day win the Nobel Prize. And it just follows their relationship. And then in part 2, we have Amar, who is an Iraqi American, who he has dual citizenship because he was born on a plane between Iraq and the States. And he ends up, en route to go visit his brother in Kurdistan, he ends up getting detained at Heathrow Airport. So we follow him and conversations between him and his brother, his interactions with the security staff, and or not security staff, but like the immigration people, I suppose, at Heathrow Airport. And then in the coda, we have a transcript of a Desert Island Discs radio episode. It's a BBC show. It reminded me, in the States, it reminded me of an NPR show. So this is an actual radio show on the BBC that happens, and she wrote it to be a conversation with Ezra Blazer, the character, the famous author from part 1. And the whole book is dotted with asymmetries. The structure of the book itself is asymmetrical. We have asymmetries in age and class and accepted, not accepted, foreigner, native, all sorts of things throughout. This is a great book if you are willing to challenge yourself a bit, to allow a book to make you think, and if you want to dig a little deeper than what seems evident on the surface. I gave Asymmetry 4 stars. Another recommendation from Russell at Ink and Paper blog is The Island of Sea Women by Lisa C. This is a story following the Haenyeo, which are these female divers on the island Jeju, which is just southeast of Korea. It's kind of situated between Korea and Japan, but it is part of South Korea. We follow two main characters, Haenyeo. Young-suk is our primary character, and it follows her life and particularly her relationship with fellow Haenyeo, Mija, who is from a very different background. The island of Jeju is a matrifocal society, so the Haenyeo, these female divers who have amazing skill, physical skill at diving and being able to withstand cold temperatures for long periods of time, being able to withstand the pressure of this free diving that they're doing, and then of the actual fishing for abalone, sea urchin, octopus, what have you. This tradition of the women being the Haenyeo of doing this diving started with Japanese colonialism, where the men, the male fishermen, were being ridiculously taxed by the Japanese for their fish. So the women were then sent into the water to dive to feed themselves and to sell for profit. And such evolved this society with the Haenyeo. So we're experiencing the Japanese colonialism in the 30s and 40s, and then as world events continue to happen, World War II, the Korean War, we experience through mainly Young-suk and her relationship with Mija, how individually their lives are going and are affected by world matters, and then how world matters affect their entire society in the island of Jeju and South Korea. Starting from the 1930s up until present day, this book illuminates the struggle and often terror that they underwent, highlighting the impact on individual lives, but also on their society as a whole. I really loved the personal relationships and the whole cultural experience of having the women be the breadwinner, the matrifocal society, and some of the ideas about men were almost like funny because it's so opposite of how we're used to. I read some of this book out loud. I read some of this out loud to my husband, and I'm reading him like, don't take this personally. This is how they believe in their society, because it borders on man bashing, but it's not intended to be man bashing. That's just how life in their society is and how their gender roles are. So I found there was a great deal of levity in that. I'm not sure if it's meant to be funny, but I found it quite humorous. But there was a bit, for me, kind of end of the middle section during the Korean War that really kind of dipped for me. And part of it was that their life was such a struggle at that time that it was kind of a struggle to read it. I didn't necessarily want to read it because things weren't going so well for them. Lisa C. elegantly yet brutally depicts the life of someone living under colonialism, living through wars when that's happening in your own backyard. There is a scene in this, as I was reading, my jaw literally dropped. My eyebrows were up in my hairline. I couldn't believe what I was reading. But it was so well done and crucial to the actual storyline. I highly recommend this, especially if you like historical fiction. This is a must. I gave this 4 stars. And last up for part 1 of my June wrap-up is With the Fire on High by Elizabeth Acevedo. I just got the title of that just now. Anyhow, Elizabeth Acevedo is the author of the much lauded The Poet X, which was told in verse. This is prose, but it is beautifully written. It is poetic without being lyrical, if that makes sense. It's quite plainly written, like it's somehow plainly written, yet also beautifully written, if that makes any sense. So this book, we follow Imani, who is a senior in high school with a daughter, and they live with Imani's grandmother. Imani has a passion for cooking, and in this, as she's going through her senior year of high school, and that's a very, I really, what am I trying to say? I really related to Imani in this story as far as your senior year of high school being a very crucial time of decision making, and especially being so young, you feel like everything revolves on this decision. Do you go to college? Where do you go to college? Do you go straight to work? Do you go to trade school? Whatever it is. And so she has this amazing work ethic and drive to be something, to provide for herself and for her daughter, and to take the pressure off of her grandmother. But she also has this passion for cooking. So how can she marry the two? Is that possible to do that? So there's great question. I think particularly, this is a YA book, so I think particularly for a YA audience, it's a really great subject matter to tackle, is that questioning period. Is college everyone right? Is college right for everyone? Should you go down that line? Is there benefit to working first or going to a trade school or whatever that is, and looking at the process of that decision making. I love that we have the story of a young Black woman who, despite her circumstances, is portrayed as hardworking and has an ability to succeed in life, that she is not a victim of her circumstances, but she is a fighter despite her circumstances, and she is portrayed in a complex and wholly human manner. Acevedo writes beautiful characters, and the writing is stunning. I am down for whatever she has to publish next. I gave With the Fire on High 5 stars, and this is now one of my favorite books of the year. Thank you for watching part 1 of my June wrap-up. Let me know if you've read any of these books, or have you read any of these authors. Let me know what you think about them, or are you interested in reading any of these? If you want to find out what else I plan on reading in the second half of June, you can check out my June TBR. If you want to keep up with what I'm doing, hit the subscribe button. See you around the tubes.